This episode of The Bill and Callie Show is brought to you by...
Hurt in a wreck. Why would you even think about calling the insurance company first?
Call someone who's going to work for you, not against you.
The insurance companies are not on your side. We are.
We are Lerner and Rowe.
Lerner and Rowe are the lawyers for you. Call 222-2222.
Hello and welcome to our show. Today we have Bob Carnagey of the Folds of Honor of Northwest Indiana. Bob is currently a volunteer for Folds of Honor, and Folds of Honor is an organization that was originally created by a Lieutenant Colonel Rooney, who was an F-16 fighter pilot in Iraq and served two tours of duty. And on his rotation back from Iraq, he was on a commercial flight that also had a fallen warrior on board. And as they were disembarking and getting ready to take the casket off, the pilot came on and asked people to remain seated. And Lieutenant Colonel Rooney noted that no one remained seated as the pilot had instructed. So this kind of inspired him to create a non-for-profit called Folds of Honor, which provides some services that Bob is going to tell us about. So Bob, first of all, thank you for coming on our show and welcome.
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure to share this information with you and your listening audience. I think I was touched the first time I heard this story, and everybody gets touched for various reasons, and I'm a Vietnam veteran, and when I heard this story or read this story, I immediately thought back to when I came home and left a few of my buddies over there, and I said, I wonder what we did for their kids. And without even spending any time to think about it, I knew the answer, because this country wasn't of the ilk at that time for assisting Vietnam veterans to have done anything in this area. So I said, boy, this is a wonderful thing. Let me find out about it. Went in and dug into it a little bit deeper and found out that Dan was a captain when this incident happened. And he was on an airplane, and he had seen a young man in the front part of the airplane that had a full-dressed military uniform on. Little did Dan know that it was the twin brother of the young man who was in the holding area. And Dan happened to be sitting on the side of the airplane so that he could look out the window and see the baggage area where they would be unloading the coffin, and saw the family there to accept the coffin, a flag-draped coffin, but he also saw the 9-year-old son that was part of the entourage, and that's what really touched him. Then when he turned back to the plane and saw that about half the plane had disembarked from the plane after the pilot had already asked them to stay seated, he just knew something had to happen. He didn't know at that moment what, but he immediately called his wife, and he said, I can't tell you what just happened, but our lives just changed. And so he and several other folks who were in the military, and some I'm sure that weren't, put their heads together to try to figure out how they could help the children of these fallen heroes. And it took probably a year and a half, but the background story on Dan was that he went to the University of Oklahoma State University, on a golf scholarship. His plan was to become a professional golfer. And after a year out of school, he realized that to become a professional golfer, he was going to have to be very, very fortunate. And so he decided that he would follow up his second plan, which was to be an F-16 fighter pilot, and he joined the Oklahoma Air National Guard. And hence, when we started to engage in activities in Iraq, he was deployed 3 times. And this activity that we're talking about took place on his return, and he flew into O'Hare. He was going to change planes and go on to Grand Rapids, where his family was visiting his grandparents at the time. So through a lot of thinking and planning, they determined that some kind of a scholarship program needed to be put together. And because Dan was involved with the golf community, even while he was in the Air National Guard as a fighter pilot, he got a hold of the USGA and the PGA, which for those golfers that are listening would know them as the governing bodies for the Professional Golf Association. He explained to them what he was trying to do and set up a scholarship program. They bought in immediately. And so when I bumped into the Folds of Honor, I was on a golf course in Valpo, and they had a basket sitting out on the counter, and they said over the Labor Day weekend, for every round of golf you play, we'd like you to put $1 in the basket. And that's how they were raising money at that time, which would have been 2011, was just $1 from the golfers. And so it has grown tremendously since then. And to date, there are over 20,000 kids that have applied for scholarships and been granted scholarships. Now, that doesn't mean 20,000 people have died, but what it does mean is that there's a number of people that have died with children that have participated, and then this also is a scholarship program for those who have a parent who is severely wounded, and by severely they talk about 30% disability and above. And so those are the folks that have families that have joined in to ask for scholarship assistance. The way the scholarship program worked then and does now is that when you apply, there's an online process that's very easy to fill out, handle, do all the information that's required. And then, of course, you have to support that application with the actual documentation of the tragedy that has hit your home. And then the first young man that I helped with this process, took about 2 weeks for the foundation to get back to his grandparents and tell them that he was a scholarship recipient. Now, he was 11 years old at that time. So, as a scholarship recipient, $5,000 was put into the foundation with his name on it and was going to sit there until he needed it. And in his situation, when he became 18 years of age, he was planning on going to college. And so he let the foundation know where he was going to go to school, when he was going to start, et cetera, et cetera. And they prepared to deliver a check to the bursar's office of that college in his name. And so since it went to the bursar's office, it was utilized only for college expenses, such as room and board, books, tuition, that kind of stuff. So the young man didn't get money to put in his checking account or savings account or anything like that. It just sat in his account within the bursar's department for expenses. So fast forward to today, there are 20,000 kids active in the system. Each scholarship is worth $5,000 a year. And you have the ability as a recipient to apply 4 times. So your freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year, you can apply for the scholarship. As long as you can maintain the grade point average that they set for this, and it's not all A's or anything like that, it's passing grades. You can get 4 scholarships through the foundation, which would equal $20,000.
Oh, my word.
Now, if you take $20,000 times 20,000 students, you'll come up with a number that's kind of mind-boggling. And so we've done a lot of fundraising here in the Northwest Indiana area, and we've done some of it related to the golf community, but some of it has been done car shows, and one middle school in Chesterton they did a run the first year where the parents and the kids ran a 5K, and they collected money that way. They've done carnivals in the wintertime and things like that to raise funds. So there's all different ways that people can contribute to this foundation. It's online, Folds of Honor Foundation .org, and you can find out about them, find the details of which we've just talked about. The story that we've just discussed is online. It's done much better than you and I did, Bill, because it's given directly by Dan Rooney in a video. On that, the other video links they have there are some of the students who have participated in the scholarship program, thanking the folks from the Folds of Honor Foundation for the fact that they wouldn't have been able to make it through college if they didn't have the assistance that was given to them by the foundation. And when I translate that to people, it's a pretty easy transition, because if you just stop and think about it, here's a family. Generally speaking, it's the man of the family, not always, but it usually is. And he was killed or severely wounded. There's a hole in that family that will be there forever. For the most part, they can't go out and play catch with their son in the side yard. They can't go to a Cub game with their kids. And who's going to fill that hole? Nobody's going to fill that hole but the citizens of this country that have the opportunity to live under the blanket of the United States of America's flag and live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. And it's our job to fill in to the hole that's been created in this family some way, shape, or form. Right. And it's going to be impossible for you and I to run around and meet every one of them that sits in that situation. But we can certainly help the participants in the Folds of Honor Foundation. And so, if you just stop and think about it, tragedies strike a lot of families in a lot of different ways. But when they give their life for their country, this country needs to give something back to help take care of these children that are left with a hole in their life forever. Right. And so that's the way I look at this from Bob Carnegey's perspective. Yeah. And I can tell you, from that day that I saw the basket on the desk at the golf course to today, my life has changed unbelievably. The experiences I've had have been so unique, so touching to have met some of the people that I've met, and have met families of people I would have never known in a million years. And they all have a bonding because there's got to be a family that cares about this country. They've sacrificed the ultimate sacrifice for this country. And so it's a small way that we can give back and help them understand that we really, really, really care about what has affected their lives.
All right. Just a few questions. Well, this is, I tell you, just sitting here listening to the benefit that this provides is amazing. And you're right. These are families that have a huge hole. And even in a wounded state, I mean, that's someone who's going to be struggling to help out with his family, be employed, and to provide a service to look after the children's tuition or educational expenses once they get to college is huge.
Yes.
It assures that the family isn't stopping. They could go on and get successful careers. Question I have for you. Do you have, besides individual contributors and the involvement from the golf community, are there any large corporate sponsors that help out with this foundation?
Yes. To hit the numbers that I talked about with 20,000 times 20,000, probably the largest contributor that I'm aware of is Anheuser-Busch. And Anheuser-Busch has a program every year. They've had some really cool commercials where they show the brewing line, and they have some of the veterans that work for Anheuser-Busch there showing some people around. They come into a general area where they can have a discussion. That's probably where they serve beer and things like that when they have a tour. And these are pretty much young people that are in the room with these guys who are veterans that work on the line.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of their conversation, the young people explain that they're all recipients of the scholarship that have just taken the tour of the brewery. And the look on the veterans' faces is just absolutely mind-boggling.
I hear you.
Because they had no idea they were touring, giving a tour to recipients from the Folds of Honor Foundation. So that's probably the most meaningful donation that they receive every year from Anheuser-Busch. And it means a lot. There are other organizations. If you go to the website for the Folds of Honor, you'll find some of the other sponsors that do a lot. I know Quick Oil or something like that, a lubrication organization that's scattered around the country. Bushmill, which is a company that sells some things for the golf course where you can have a range finder to find out how far away you are from the hole and all that stuff. When you buy one of those, you open the box and you'll get a whole packet of information on the Folds of Honor. So there are lots of organizations. If you pay attention, Chicago Bulls have, like when they have a Monday night game, they'll have a quarter of the game where there's a deal on getting some of the refreshments, and the money goes directly to the Folds of Honor Foundation. So you'll find them in many, many, many places.
Right.
And so a lot of the country has gotten behind this program. It's not just the golf community.
Good. That's good to hear. And, it's so important to get those names out there, those companies that do that good support of foundations like Folds of Honor. Because guess what? People are out there with their dollars, and, they may say, gosh, they're great. They're supporting our veterans' children. They're making sure they're getting an education. I think as opposed to going over to get my oil changed over there, I'm going to go over here.
Sure.
And maybe spend a couple extra dollars and help support a company that supports our veterans.
Well, I can tell you that we have two companies that are huge in helping us on a local basis. Mm-hmm. And that's the people at Curry Ford in Valparaiso, Indiana. They put on a car show every Memorial Day weekend on Saturday. And all the proceeds come to the Folds of Honor.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation with them just like you and I are having. And there's a term that's used sometimes when you're interacting with people, and you say, they get it. And as soon as we were done with that conversation, the general manager looked at me and he said, Bob, we're in. Mm-hmm. And I knew immediately, they get it. And I have another organization based in Valpo called Family Express.
Oh, yeah.
They get it.
Yeah. Oh, they totally. Gus and his entire company are based on outreach.
Right.
And I think they're appreciative of what the community gives to them, and they're one of the people that definitely get it about giving back to the community. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
And one of the things you don't know, Gus has some sons that are in the business. Well, one of those sons served in the National Guard and had a deployment to Iraq.
There you go. Yep.
And he and I worked together on all these projects together. Mm-hmm. And you can't find a more giving person than this young man.
No, that's true. That's very true. Yep. Yeah. And so it's important to get that out so people can go to the website. Are some of the companies that are giving, are they on the website or?
Well, the way to do it, just go to the website for the Folds of Honor, foldsofhonor.org. And you can get on their website. They ask if you want to become a wingman because they follow through with the theme of Dan being an F-16 fighter pilot. And he likes to have wingmen. And so they can make a donation on a monthly basis or a one-time deal or whatever you'd like to do. They're extremely accommodating. It's very easy to do. Okay. But I can tell you this, in our society today, there are sometimes people will abuse charitable organizations. Mm-hmm. And it's a terrible thing, but it's, part of the makeup of people today.
Right.
But the Folds of Honor is very proud about what they've accomplished, and they're what's called an 87-13. Could be 86-14. I can't remember which it is. But that means 86 cents out of every dollar is put into the foundation. And 14 cents of every dollar is put into overhead for them.
Right.
And that's a very high ranking within some of the organizations that rate charitable causes. Dan Rooney had the opportunity to meet President Bush one day at an airport when he was still a president, and he said to Dan, "I'll give you 3 or 4 days a year. Use me however you'd like." And to this day, they're together having the first T-ball on Patriot Golf Weekend over the Labor Day weekend.
Pretty much the main focus of the foundation, providing scholarships or assistance to family members or the service members that may have become disabled during their service, to help them with educational expenses.
That's correct.
Right.
But for the vast majority, excuse me, the vast majority of participants are children or wives or husbands of those that were injured.
Right. And so what we'll do is put the website up connected to this post when we put the show up, and to make sure people know how to get to it. And boy, I tell you, more and more I read about this, and I've known you through the Kiwanis. We're involved in the Kiwanis Veterans Appreciation Dinner every year, and you're always at one of the tables. So it's been a pleasure knowing you and knowing what you do, and now I get more information about it. It's just a phenomenal way of making sure these people are taken care of. So it's great to know that there are organizations out there like USA Cares and Folds of Honor that help. Now, also, what is the relationship with Applebee's? I know that they were a recipient of something recently.
Right. So what happens there? Applebee's, like any other type of restaurant that's a chain, sometimes we'll get on board with some of these kinds of things, or maybe the local store might get on board. Well, in this situation, Applebee's themselves, as a corporation, got on board with the Folds of Honor. And Chrissy Byers, who was the general manager of the Applebee's in Valparaiso, really, really got wrapped up in this. And so she and I got together. We did some things so they could get T-shirts for all of their employees to wear during the month of May.
Right.
And so they had a contest amongst their employees that who could influence their customers to make a donation. They wanted to earn $5,000 during the month of May, and they made it. And so Chrissy was honored at their annual general managers meeting as being one of the top fundraisers for the Folds of Honor, and representatives from the Folds of Honor were there and presented her with a beautiful leather bomber jacket.
Yeah, I saw that.
She is so proud of that, and I'm envious.
Yeah. Well, I tell you the reason I asked about that. I've got some news for you and news for folks out there. We just recently started a individual sponsorship program, a way that people can sponsor the Bill and Kelly Show. And they may not own a company, but we've had people come up to us and said, "Look, we love what you guys do. We love that you are becoming the media outlet for all these non-for-profits. We want to help." And I said, "Well, we're not ready to do that." And finally, we found a way of doing it. And lo and behold, so we changed it up a bit this week, being it's holiday week. And however, we think we're going to continue on with this, is that if a contributor comes forward and opts to sponsor our show, and it could be at any variety level that they'd like, we're going to contribute 50% of their fees to a non-for-profit. This week it is the Food Bank of Northwest Indiana. And
Sure.
lo and behold, I'll tell you who that is Chrissy Byers.
Uh-huh.
No shock
Not
to you, right?
surprising. It is not surprising to me at all.
No. In fact, I've got her name up on the screen. Chrissy, we want to thank you so very much for coming forward and helping out the cause, keeping the Bill and Kelly Show going. We have expenses here. Every show that we put on has expenses. We have to pay
Sure.
licensing fees to our different platforms that we are on, and so on, and there's equipment and so on. But we wanted to make a way that it doesn't all go to us, that we, in our tradition is we help a lot of organizations out as well. We wanted them to share. So that, Chrissy, if you're out there listening, thank you very much. And how ironic we're announcing it on our show for the Folds of Honor.
Well, I can only tell you that if you can introduce me to somebody with a bigger heart than Chrissy, please do.
Oh, there's not many. I'll tell you, she is
No.
she's absolutely great, and she deserved that jacket. Tell you right now.
That's for sure.
So again, thank you, Chrissy, and appreciate the contribution that you made, and we will give your 50% to the Food Bank of Northwest Indiana. So, and we do want to remind everyone that this is also brought to you by another company that believes in giving back to the community. That's Lerner and Rowe Injury Attorneys. So they're sponsoring the Bill and Kelly Show and this particular show as well. So thank you, Lerner and Rowe, for everything you do for the community. And Bob, is there anything else you want to share with us before we close the show?
Well, I can tell you that over the last few years, since I've been involved with the Folds of Honor, so many doors have opened to me to get involved in other charitable type things, and it has changed my life. So when people have some time and they can donate that time to some type of an organization that gives back, wonderful things will happen, and you'll feel really good about giving that time and that effort to a charitable cause. So I thank
Definitely.
you very much for what you guys do.
I appreciate it, and that's every time we do a show. And some of them are entertaining, like we're going to have one this week that's going to be entertaining. But for the most part, we like being the mouthpiece for people that, on other outlets, they're considered human interest stories. And what I always tell people, you're a human interest story elsewhere. You're our headline, and that's the way we look at it, and that's the way we try to run our show.
Great.
So, well, Bob, listen, it's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate you coming on. And by all means, I hope you have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And maybe we could get you back on the show again.
I'd look forward to the opportunity, and I want you and your listeners all to have a great Christmas.
Thank you.
This episode of The Bill and Callie Show is brought to you by
Hurt in a wreck. Why would you even think about calling the insurance company first?
Call someone who's going to work for you, not against you.
The insurance companies are not on your side. We are.
We are Lerner and Rowe.
Lerner and Rowe are the lawyers for you. Call 222-2222.